Okay. Greetings, compadres. Today, I have Hadley Sorenson on. And I love a guest. I love a guest because I love hearing people share about what's going on in their life, how they quit drinking, what kind of things they're working on now. And so this is really exciting because I'm going to read you Hadley's bio, and she has a book coming out very soon. Hello, love it. So she's a mom of three boys. She's a lifelong runner and a writer. Her debut book, wait for this title, it's awesome. The Dirty Truth on Social Drinking, Everything in Moderation, in quotes, and Other BS, comes out May 14th. Yay! So awesome. I love the title. As an enthusiastic social drinker throughout her life, she always felt like her relationship with alcohol was problematic. Her drinking often resulted in blackouts and an overwhelming sense of shame. Yep, been there. It wasn't about how much or how often she drank. It was about how she felt when she did. Pay attention to that, right? 2.5 years ago, she woke up with her last hangover, her heart screaming that sobriety was the right choice. She had no idea that a whole new, beautiful life was about to unfold. Now she uses her social media platform to tell her story with the hopes it will reach someone struggling as she was. Her goal is to help others realize that anyone can quit drinking at any time for any reason. So, Hadley, welcome.
Wow, thank you. You do a killer introduction, I have to say. I
Oh,
feel like
that's
you made it sound a lot more exciting than it really is.
Oh my word. Well, that's so nice. I think I get passionate too when I read somebody else's bio because I'm just like, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, I totally relate. And so, that just gets me pumped. And so on that note, I would love it, Hadley, if you would just launch in and tell us as much or as little as you would like to share
Sure.
about your story and what led you to this place today.
Sure, I would love to. So, I am, as you said, I'm a mom of three boys. I live in the Washington, D.C. metro area. I've been here for almost my whole life. And I knew that something was off about my relationship with alcohol from the start. I had my first drink, got drunk for the first time at the age of 14. And as a socially awkward, introverted, shy teenager who was trying to figure out how to navigate all of this, I thought, wow, this is kind of amazing. This alcohol thing, it kind of smooths out those edges that I thought were so rough. It helps me be the person I thought I was supposed to be, more outgoing, more of whatever everyone else thought I needed to be. And so I was hooked, right? I didn't always drink very often, but it quickly became the way to socialize, the way to kind of make it through the world as an introvert. And so I went from high school into the college binge drinking scene, which was huge. Um, and it became clear very early on that I was a blackout drinker. And that was always a huge source of shame for me. Again, this says a lot about our drinking culture that no one ever recognized that as a red flag, right? I wasn't the only one who was blacking out. Nobody seemed to think there was really anything wrong with it. It was just something that everybody laughed about. But I always felt so much shame tied to that. And after college, I moved back up to the DC area. I got married relatively young. I had a stepson who was 4 at the time my husband and I got married. So I went from being young and single to being a mom really quickly. And then we had two more boys. And so I went sort of seamlessly from the college binge drinking scene to the mommy wine culture scene.
Mhm.
It was, all the same.
Hold on one sec. Hadley, I think I lost your audio for 1 second. Um, Let me see. Yeah, I just got the last part I got was going seamlessly from the college binge drinking to the mommy wine club.
Okay, I'll just start
Yep. Okay,
there.
perfect. Sorry, thank you.
Sure. I'm seeing a thing that says my connection is unstable, and I don't understand why. I hope that was it. Just raise your hand if it happens again.
Sure, no problem.
So I went very seamlessly from the college binge drinking scene to the mommy wine culture scene. Suddenly, all the same people who'd been binge drinking in college were now binge drinking, but it was totally acceptable because we were drinking expensive wine in the cul-de-sac, wearing nice clothes, while we had the baby monitors to listen to the kids waking up. And it just was what everyone did around me. And I never felt good about it. I always felt like something was off. And I would go through that same old cycle of there would be a drinking episode. I would black out. I would get drunk. I would feel so much shame and regret. And so I would take a break, right? I would stop drinking for a week, a month, a couple months, and I could do that really well, which was further confirmation that I didn't have any kind of a problem, right? Because I could take a break. I didn't have to, I wasn't drinking every day. I wasn't drinking in the morning, all these kind of made up criteria I had for what constituted a problem. Um, and uh, but I always went back to the same old pattern. Every time I took a break, it was always with the intention of sort of resetting myself, back to factory settings. So then I could go back to drinking as a normal drinker. That just
Mm.
never happened. Moderation was not in the cards for me. I'm someone who can't moderate hand soap or M&Ms or just about anything else. I certainly couldn't moderate the amount that I was drinking. So after years and years of sort of repeating this cycle, a really rough 2020 for my family. In 2021, it seemed to sort of escalate. It was the first time I was really feeling the impacts of my drinking on my mental health. I would binge drink kind of through the weekend at our lake house that we have about 2 hours from home because you're on vacation, so it's like vacation drinking, and we'd have friends there. So I would binge drink all weekend, and then I would get hit with sort of a depressive episode, along with that hangover come Monday morning, and that would last a few days. And by Thursday, I would feel normal again, but then we would head back to the lake and repeat the whole cycle. And I just felt like something was coming to a head. I knew that there was some sort of shift coming. And in fact, I'd felt it coming for 2 years. It was just kind of nudging me closer and closer to where I needed to be. And then August 6th of 2021, I woke up, with the hot chills and the rotten stomach and all of that after drinking too much rosé the day before, and I just knew. I mean, the only way I know how to describe it is that I just got hit with this sort of head to toe knowing that
Mm.
this was it. I had to make a change, and it wasn't just about taking a break, it was about really turning away from alcohol and making a bigger change in my life. And so I decided that would be my last hangover, and it was. And so that was almost 3 years ago now. And it wasn't always, it wasn't necessarily easy, but I knew in my bones that it was the right choice, and it has just opened up an entirely new world to me. So I went from being sort of the epitome of mommy wine culture. I had this whole online persona built around being this wine obsessed mom of boys who loves fitness, but, still enjoys her wine, to kind of educating people about the dangers of mommy wine culture and really how sort of icky and destructive it is for moms and kids and families. And then I ultimately ended up writing a book, kind of talking about the process I went through over my first year of sobriety, figuring out who I was without alcohol. I wanted to tell the story from a different perspective. I read so many quit lit books when I first started, when I first quit drinking, but they were all really sort of rock bottom stories, which were so inspiring. But I didn't see myself reflected in them, and I had a hard time finding a book that I really related to, and so I thought, I'm gonna tell my story," and I started from there, and it's just opened up all these incredible doors, and now I'm here doing this.
I love it. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I relate so much. We have so much in common in our stories. And um, first, I want to say, I mean, the whole concept of covering one's feelings, wanting to change the way we felt with alcohol,
Yes.
right? And then
Yes.
actually wine becoming part of your identity, like,
Oh,
talking
yeah.
about like the whole, like, I love wine and I love fitness, and like having that be a thing. And I mean, I can't tell you how many jokes I used to make about myself and wine. And my best friend and I would go to the gym and we would sneak champagne in because we were so hungover. We actually had like a little beer fridge in our locker at the gym, and we thought we were just so funny,
Oh, yeah, it's so cute and clever.
Yeah, it's just like totally nuts looking back on that now. But really, I love that you talked about the feelings, because that was such a big thing, was that for me, I mean, I was covering up my feelings entirely. And I even, when I thought it was cute and funny, I knew in my heart of hearts something was off. Like, my love for alcohol had become abnormal, but I still was joking about it in hopes that maybe I could sort of manifest myself back into like a normal drinker.
Right, and I feel
Um,
like we joke about it sort of as a cover. Like, if we're out
yes,
here joking about it, we can't have a "problem" in quotes, you
right.
know?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, the importance of these conversations and about different people's stories, I mean, it's huge, right? I'm sure many of us um, got to the point, right, where we had this clear picture of what a substance use disorder or an alcohol use disorder victim was, or an alcoholic or a drug addict was and looked like. And
Yeah.
because we didn't sort of maybe fit that criteria, some of us, in our minds, it just made it so much harder to justify. And I know that for me, my self-esteem and my identity took a big hit, because I thought, well, then what's wrong with me? If I'm not the telltale alcoholic under the bridge with a trench coat and a brown bag,
Mhm.
then why can't I just get back to drinking normally? Like, I took it as like a character flaw.
Yeah, I really relate to that, and sometimes I describe it too as, like, I'm an only child, I'm type A, sort of overachiever, I can do anything if I work hard enough and try hard enough, so I had this attitude, like, I should be able to figure this out. I can figure anything else out. Why can't
Yeah.
I figure this out? So I'm just gonna keep trying because eventually I'll hack this moderation trick one day, right? Or I'll be the normal drinker that we think of, even
Yep.
though really what is a normal drinker? And so it was very frustrating that I couldn't figure it out. And just like you said, I was very good at sort of curating this picture of someone who had their ducks in a row. I had it all. I was crushing it. I was successful. My kids were well-mannered. My house always looked nice. I baked cupcakes for school events. I had my act together.
Yep.
Nobody knew that I was struggling on the back end.
So this is a random question for you, but I was thinking about So you get married, you have a stepson, you start having babies. One thing that I really went through in my early years of mothering was like I felt like I had lost my identity,
Oh,
and figuring out who I was as a mother and a woman was really hard. And you said something that kind of made me think that you maybe had had some similar experience with that. Yeah, figuring out who you were. Can
yes.
you speak to the identity a little bit? As
Yeah.
I did the same thing, as in slip into the cul-de-sac drinking too with the neighbors. So,
It's interesting. I just started kind of diving into this more, thinking about it recently. Uh I started my career in the mortgage industry and I was really driven. I loved my career. I was sort of addicted to the idea of climbing the corporate ladder. I had these big goals tied to what I was doing. Again, it's that sort of like overachiever, like hustle, hustle, hustle kind of mentality, but I loved what I did. And actually, my husband and I both worked for the same big company. So we had demanding jobs, long hours. And when I had my first son, who's 14 now, I thought I was always going to be that career woman. I was going to be the kind of the epitome of the strong working mother. Soon as he was born, it was like this total change. I don't want to go back to work. I want to be home with him. I pushed through. I made myself go back after maternity leave. I was like, I'm way too hormonal to like make a big decision like this. I'm going
smart.
to stick it out. Went back to work. It was brutal, a baby in daycare, plus my stepson that we're kind of shuttling back and forth. He was always getting sick in daycare. So we're fighting over, oh, we got to call. He has a fever. No, my meeting's more important. No, my meeting's more important. Who's going to go get him?
Mhm.
I hated it. I just wanted to be there with him. And then when I got pregnant with my youngest, we finally said, oh, we can't do this. Two under two in daycare, the expense, the juggling of our, like it just suddenly didn't make sense anymore. So we made the decision that I would stay at home and it was exactly what I wanted and it was totally what was right for our family. But that's where this sort of identity crisis came in because so much of my identity had been tied to my career and suddenly it was like I was this mom who was home with these two babies and I had no idea who I was. And, suddenly I wasn't interacting with adults anymore. It was like I forgot how to talk. I forgot how to, I felt like I had sort of lost myself. And I struggled with that for a while, as well as some postpartum depression after my youngest. And so I really sort of was churning. And I ended up kind of forging a path and starting my own little business as a health and wellness coach, which was great. It was just what I needed at the time. It fit in with my love of fitness and running and all of that. But that's when I started sort of building this social media presence and this whole cliche of the wine loving
Mhm.
mom who was still really fit was born out of that. And then I sort of latched onto it and that became my identity, which is so crazy when I think about it, that I formed an identity around a drug.
Mhm.
If it was any
Yeah,
other
but
drug, people would think that was crazy, but with alcohol, it was totally acceptable, right? Totally acceptable.
100%, right? And I mean, I hate to use this phrase because it sounds so cheesy, but at the same time, it is what it is. It was like everyone was doing it in some of the
Oh,
demographics, that some of us are in communities that we were in. And, that was kind of what people did, right? Like work out in the mornings and then in the afternoons, the wine drinking. And yeah, it was kind of the socially acceptable behavior. And I think that, that was one of the key things for me personally. Like when I got sober and I went to treatment twice. And when I got out the second time, I was like, I have to move. Like it was almost like a no brainer. And I didn't move far. We moved literally down the freeway, but I just, I knew I couldn't be in that lifestyle anymore in that neighborhood. And it just wasn't conducive to my mental health and my sobriety from alcohol and my recovery in general.
Yeah,
So
I can see that.
yeah, it was a little crazy, but I wondered if we could move into, I literally got goosebumps, excuse me, when you said, so you were going off to the lake and everything with friends over the weekend, and then that one morning in August, you woke up and you had a head to toe knowing. And I just thought that was so beautifully said.
Oh,
Um, because I've had a similar knowing at different points in my life. And I think that's incredible because, when you get a head to know to head to toe knowing, it is a phenomenon that will come over you, and you sort of just know that, okay, this shift that you referred to that has been building inside of me is now, it's here.
yeah.
Today's the day. And so I'm curious, can you walk me through how you got sober? Did you try 12-step programs or community groups, or how did you do it?
Yeah. So, when I woke up that morning, I had no idea what it was going to look like or how I was going to do it, right? I just knew that it was time. And
Mhm.
I made myself go back to sleep, and I was like, you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out when you wake up in a few hours. And so what I ended up doing, and again, I'm just kind of walking you through what I was figuring out as I went. I'm not suggesting that it's like a replicable approach for someone trying
Sure.
to get sober, but I at the time at that moment I wasn't ready to say out loud like I'm done drinking, right? I'm never going
Yep.
to drink again. That would have sounded crazy. But what I decided to do was, take on this, 75-day hard challenge that you always see people talking about on social media. It's like a 75-day wellness challenge that's sort of known for being extreme and not sustainable and whatnot, but it's it kind of meshed with my personality, right? And
Sure.
it's sort of this checklist you do every day. You do like 2 workouts. One, you have to be outside, so you just go for a walk, but it's no alcohol. You follow some type of nutrition plan. I'm trying to even remember the other, like, I think you journal or meditate once a day, or I mean, it's all like solid stuff, but I kind of thrive with checklists, right? And everything
Mhm.
else on the list really kind of meshed with how I already lived my life. So the one big change was that checkbox for no alcohol. And and so I liked having that checkbox, and it was sort of like an alibi, right? So I could say, "Oh, I'm not drinking for 75 days. I'm doing this challenge."
Mhm.
And so I just sort of quietly, fell into that pattern, but very early into it, I got comfortable saying, I'm done. I mean, I felt the fog sort of lifting
Mm.
almost immediately in terms of the impact I was seeing on my mental health,
Mm.
and my physical health. 2 weeks in, I was like, "Okay, this is it." So what I did, I kind of it was like my 3 legs, a
Mhm.
three-legged stool, right? I leaned heavily on educating myself. I read lots of books. I listened to lots of podcasts. The way my brain works, it was very helpful for me to hear those other recovery stories, to hear and learn about like the science behind alcohol and what it really
Mhm.
does to us and what the impacts are. It makes it very hard to go back to drinking when you suddenly understand how much your risk of, say, breast cancer is increased as a woman if you're drinking even small amounts. So I read a ton, I educated myself, I did a ton of self-care. I sort
Mhm.
of babied myself, right? I did lots of exercise. I took lots of walks. I really it was more than just like bubble baths and mani-pedis. I really kind of listened to what my body needed. I feel like I slept a lot. I took naps.
Mhm.
I gave myself lots of alone time because as an introvert, that's one of the things that I really kind of require for self-care. I really sort of paid attention to and listened to my body. And then community was really important for me. I didn't go to any 12-step programs. I sort of found my own community. I told the people I started telling people pretty early on what I was doing and why I was doing it. I talked about it. I wrote about it. I kind of fell into the sobriety community on Instagram, which was a huge help. And then
Mhm.
I started working with an app out of Australia that unfortunately is no longer in business. But they were sort of like the Reframe app, and it was this community of people, um, trying to help others who were changing their relationship with alcohol, and that was a huge source of support.
Mhm.
So that's kind of what it looked like. It was just sort of the self-care, education, and community,
Mm.
and that really has never let up, right? I've continued with all of that in some capacity, and it worked. It worked for me, and it felt right.
You know what? I thank you for sharing that. I love that because, you know, so I got sober and remained sober through 12-step communities. And there are some people still within those communities who are very much like, this is how you get sober and this is how you do it. Very dogmatic about
Yes.
it. And almost like, eh, it's almost like they're saying, this is how you do it, and you can't do it any other way, which is completely false, right? Like completely false. And so I love when people share, to use your word, unconventional methods, or what some might consider to be, but that have clearly worked. And I think that it's so important that we keep that conversation open and have people share about their methods that they've used that have changed their life. Because I feel like sometimes in the 12-step communities, when we get those people, it's like, oh, so you're sort of saying that sobriety is for you and your way of doing things, but it's not available to everyone who might not benefit from this 12-step meeting or fellowship the way that you have. Maybe some people are not down with that at all, but they have gotten access to a whole new life and been able to find themselves in sobriety through these other ways. And there's such power in that. And I just think it's so beautiful.
Well, thank you. I think that's such an important conversation. I always say, I think AA and 12-step programs are amazing for so many people, right? But it's also tends to be the option that everyone knows about.
Yeah.
It's the one that we hear about most, right? It gets sort of the most publicity. It's what people think of. Oh, you have a problem with drinking, you go to AA. And I get those messages from people who are very dogmatic about it on social media, because you see that you tend to see the dark side, the people telling me that I'm never going to be successful because I don't do XYZ. But I think it would be crazy if one approach worked for
Yeah.
all of us.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, so I think we
Yeah.
all just have to find what works, and
Yep.
that might mean
It's
we
not
have to keep trying because it might not work the first time.
exactly. And it's not a one size fits all. It's not like a t-shirt, it's very, and that's what I love about being in 2024, right? Is that we're so much more open and than we were back in the day with this stuff. I mean, about everything, about neurodivergence and about, identities and all of this, that it stands to reason that, well, of course, there's more than one way to find sobriety and recovery. I mean, I love that. So then, okay, so walk me through, how did you get the idea that maybe I should write a book? And how did that all come about? Did you choose traditional publishing, indie publishing? Tell me all the things.
Well, it has been a wild ride because let me tell you, I I've always been a writer, and writing has always been sort of how I process my thoughts about
Mm.
what's happening in my life. Something happens and I'm like, "Wait, hold on. I need to write about it before I can kind of make sense of it." And so it made sense. It felt very natural for me to kind of write about my experience after that morning when I sort of quit drinking. And as I slowly, started to realize that this was going to be a new way of life going forward, I was sort of journaling. At the same time, I was reading all of these quit lit books. And I because of my fitness business, I was already used to sort of sharing on social media in a kind of a vulnerable way. And so I very hesitantly started trickling out little bits of this story about alcohol on social media. And I was terrified, right? Because that's just feels super vulnerable. You're saying, "Hey, look, I had a problem." But I was overwhelmed by the number of people who were coming to me and saying, "Oh my gosh, me too. Me too. I've always
Mhm.
felt that way. Oh, it feels so good to know I'm not alone." And I
Mhm.
was kind of taken aback, like, "Oh, wait, I thought I was the only one that felt like this." But I wasn't. So I started sharing more and I started sharing more, and it felt really cathartic to it was like it was helping me shed the shame that I'd been holding
Mhm.
on to, by shining the light on it. And so I just kept writing and I kept writing. And I said to my husband one day, I think maybe this should be a book. He said, "Do it." I just all of the books I had read were, like I said, so inspiring and they helped me so much, but the drinking problems they were describing just looked different than mine. Not that one was worse or one was, it's just we all experience this differently. And I thought there's a lot of women who drink socially, right? Because that's what we tell ourselves. Well, I'm just
Right.
a social drinker. The way I drank, everyone around me was drinking the same way.
Mhm.
Um, so we're telling ourselves this story about what a problem has to look like. Um, and most of those other women aren't going to read a book that's about this rock bottom story that they don't think they could ever get to that point, right? I
Right.
felt like I was close, I was on some sort of precipice. Like I was very close to a shift where things were about to get worse. And I
Mhm.
managed to stop myself before I got there. So I'm grateful.
Mhm.
So I just kept writing and I said, "I'm gonna write until I feel like I've told my story, and then I'm gonna figure out how the heck you publish a book. Because if I
Mhm.
start down that rabbit hole now, I'm afraid I'll stop writing. So I'm just gonna
Yes.
I'm gonna do all of the writing, get to a good place, and then I'll figure out what comes next." And so
Mhm.
as you know, I'm sure it was kind of a crazy experience then trying to figure out how the publishing world works
Yeah.
and how do you write a book proposal and how do you query agents. And I decided I was going to try to go the traditional publishing route first, so I started querying agents, and of course that's a long painful process. And finally, I found an agent after she had me work with an editor for a while. I worked with the editor, then, the agent started going the traditional route. I ended up going the indie
Mhm.
route, so not a big publisher, um, but it has felt right because it's just people who have believed in this project from the very beginning and really wanted to help me tell my story in a way that would resonate with people. So it's been a really fun process, and it's
Mhm.
been dragging on, well, not dragging on, but it's taken so long. Now the fact that it's going to be out a week from tomorrow, I'm suddenly terrified and
Oh,
excited at the same time.
like pre-congratulations
Thank
because
you.
it is a huge accomplishment. And I think the misnomer, if I can just say this, is that I think people think, oh, well, if you're publishing indie publishing, then all you do is, you put it out there yourself. It's no big deal. And they have no idea what goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And it is so much work. I mean, it's all doable,
Yeah.
but it's a lot of steps. And yeah, it is a labor of love, right? Like, That's what I found. And it's like, you got to kind of be tenacious and called to really, feel compelled to get your story out there. And, um, you know, I think having creative control, that's just my opinion of the whole process, is just a gift. It is just a treasure that is so wonderful. So I'm so, so excited for you. And I
Thank you.
love that you are just on the brink of it because it is so awesome. So I need to know how you came up with the title.
So that was kind of a collaboration between me and my publisher. My original sort of working title for the book was Confessions of a Picture Perfect Mom, right?
Mm,
Because a big piece of the book is centered around the fact that, well, not a you know what I mean, the idea that I had this perfect sort of looking life, right? I had curated a highlight reel on social media, but I was struggling in private and nobody new, and so that's what we'd been working with on, that was just kind of the title for a long time. Well, then just in the last couple of months, as things started getting real and we had a date, everyone sort of agreed that that wasn't really the right title for the book. We wanted people to understand what it was about. So
mhm.
we came up with the idea of, using the term social drinking because I feel like it sort of lowers the barrier to entry for people
Yeah.
who, like I said, are like, well, I don't have a problem. I'm just a social drinker, right?
Mhm.
Um, and might read the book and see a piece of themselves in it. And the the subtitle, Everything in Moderation and Other BS, I sort of came up with because I felt like it needed a little bit of snark. It needed
Yes.
a little bit of my personality and sort of the way I operate on social media. And it is such BS that we are sold this story about how we should be able to moderate an addictive drug. And if we can't, there's something wrong with us,
Right.
right? And I say it with love for all the people who think that because I used to be one of them. I was a fitness coach who told everybody, "Oh, everything in moderation. I still
Mhm.
drink my red wine. You can still have yours, haha, it's good for the
Mhm.
heart." Such
Yeah.
again, such BS. Um, so I'm
Yeah.
hoping it might draw in an audience that might otherwise be a little hesitant to pick up a book that's gonna make them sort of face their relationship with alcohol if they're not quite ready to do that.
I love it. I love it so, so much because it's such a prevalent topic. It's just huge still. Like the whole, the mommy wine culture thing like took off and just it was gone, right? Like it
Oh,
was
yeah.
down a pathway, no turning back kind of thing. Mommy's little helper, blah blah blah. And I loved I have to, my ADHD brain just like reverted to something that you had said about how you got sober. And I wanted to say how much I loved hearing you share about the self-love that you let yourself have, the babying yourself that you allowed in your life. And I know that that is one thing that's sort of counterintuitive as mothers, and
Yeah.
especially high functioning mothers, to be like, oh, well, I don't really maybe have time, to sit and listen to this podcast episode or read this book or do some extra journaling or do some affirmations or some meditations or whatever. And it's like, no, no, that's all part of it. That stuff is foundational, right? Like that stuff is, we have to do that, right?
Yeah. You gotta
Because
find the time, sister.
yeah, and it's one of those things that, like when I first got sober, I did not love myself. I hated myself.
Oh,
Like I
yeah.
hated who I had become. I couldn't look in the mirror without going, "Who are you? I mean, how dare you? Like, let this happen to yourself and to your family." Like I still was kind of in that blame and shame cycle. And I had a therapist and he was a shaman, and he said, you need to practice looking in the mirror and say to yourself, I love you. And I was like, oh, it
This
sounds
sounds like
so
a
awful.
punishment, right?
Yeah. And just so awkward. But I've at that point, I was willing to follow directions. And I did. I did that. And it's like slowly I realized, you know what? I'm worth trying. Like I'm worth trying to stay sober for. And
Yes.
I had not thought that before because I was kind of just going to do it to get everybody off my back and to clean my life up.
Right.
I never considered the gifts that I would receive for my own self and my own identity and self-esteem by getting sober. But I had to take that step of like cultivating self-love in
That,
whatever form that shows up, So I
yeah.
love that you mentioned that. And then community, it's like, yeah, whether it's a 12-step fellowship or whether it's some, group that you find on the internet or an app that no longer exists, whatever it is like, yeah, do it. Because the alternative, right, is we're still in our cups, waking up hungover every day and ruining our lives one day at a time and everybody else's, with the fallout. And so um, I'm just very inspired by hearing you share all of that. And so thank you for that. And also, I mean, your book is um it's going to have an impact. We need more stories like this. We just do. We just need more stories of high functioning women who find themselves at a crossroads,
Well,
So,
thank you for saying that.
yeah.
Yeah, I think hearing other people's stories is so powerful. It was really powerful for me, and there's something about realizing that wow, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not the problem. Other people are going through this. It really makes a big difference. And I think, like you said, the more stories that are out there for us to hear,
Mhm.
the more there's a chance for someone to see themselves in one of those stories and feel like they now have the permission to speak up about it.
Absolutely. And then you also mentioned education, and it's like, yeah, I mean, alcohol and its effects on us, especially women, this was
Oh,
not what we were sort of told that it was.
oh
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, have a glass of red wine for your heart health and all this. It's like, okay, what? And now that I'm 47, and within the next decade, I'll be in menopause, right? Like, I mean, thank God I'm sober. I wouldn't want to be approaching menopause and still be drinking.
Oh, I think about that so often, and I think it's a conversation we need to be,
Yeah.
shouting from the rooftops. In fact, every doctor should be having this conversation with women as they near perimenopause age. Alcohol is the absolute last thing we need as we're
Right.
going through perimenopause. And I'm right there with you. I just turned 44 and there's all kinds of little changes that are just starting. I know things are kind of brewing inside and I can't imagine if I was pouring alcohol on top, adding fuel to the fire. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just a train wreck for these hormonal changes.
It is. And I think that, the more we normalize these conversations, like you're doing, by putting your book out into the world, um, the better because it is true that, we've been sold a false set of goods about, and of course, the alcohol industry has no interest in hearing any of our stories and us publicizing them. But like, I mean, having our body go through intense upcoming changes and then like, oh yeah, let's amplify all of our feelings about those changes and have it affect us, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, even like does not sound like a good combination to me.
No. No, and
Yeah.
I recently heard from a follower on Instagram who is a doctor, a family physician, and was saying, she was saying, thank you for having for talking about these things, because as somebody in the medical profession, we don't bring it up with our patients because we're all drinking the same way.
Mm,
Right? We're not gonna have this conversation about gray area drinking or go into, how much are you really having a week? It's so normalized in the medical,
yeah.
in the medical world. She said that's how we got through med school. It's how we got through our residencies. It's how we got through all this stuff. Everybody was drinking.
Hmm.
So that's not going to be something that we're likely to raise. And I think maybe that's starting to shift,
Mm,
but
yeah.
definitely something that we should be talking about.
I appreciate you saying that. It's so true. So, so true. And Hadley, as we start wrapping up, I would love to know, how has this affected your relationships? So, your family relationships and everything. I know that's one thing that people always kind of want to hear about, because it is a big change to go from drinking to not drinking, and you know dry holidays if that's what you choose to do or not. And yeah.
So it's been a great thing for my
Mhm.
family and my relationships. Now, my husband still drinks, I'll say that, but he's I refer to him as a moderation unicorn. He's one of
Yes.
those people that just has a drink, takes it or leaves it, no big deal. So it has not been a problem for me, but he's been very supportive. But most of my friends all still drink. They've also been very supportive. I've had to create some boundaries, learn how to sort of advocate for myself, but everyone has been supportive. Um, it's been a really cool experience going through this with my boys at the ages
Mm,
that they're at, and I feel like it's brought us closer in some ways. It's also been a really cool way to have some really tough conversations with them that I
mhm,
wouldn't have had if I was still having a glass of wine at 5 p.m. every day and,
yeah.
binging all weekend at the lake house. That would have been the only side of alcohol that they saw. And they would have really been absorbing a lot of that at 12, almost 13 and 14.
Mhm.
And my 25-year-old is obviously out of the house and off on his own. So, um, but it's been cool to have them be a part of this. And they're proud of me. I just had my 1,000-day milestone
Oh,
last Friday, and I made myself a big cake, and we did a thing for social media, and my youngest got home from school and he was like, "Oh, that's right, Mom. Congratulations on 1,000 days." Um,
awesome.
it's just that feels really special.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I think it's made my relationships stronger because, like we talked about, that whole phenomenon of self-love, right? I had to
Mhm.
learn to like myself before I could love myself. And
Mhm.
then once I got there, it was like my confidence grew, being able to trust myself, all of the sort of ripple effects
Mhm.
of walking away from alcohol. They made me a better mother, a better wife, a better friend. So it's really had a big impact.
Oh, I love it. Okay, you guys, did you hear that? Hadley did it. You can do it too. And okay, this is exciting, because if you are listening to this episode past May 14th, the book is already out and you can just go get it, right?
Yeah.
But Hadley, tell us where people can purchase your book then.
Amazon. You can
Yep.
search for it on Amazon and it'll be there by the time you're listening to this.
Ah,
So
okay, you
exciting.
guys. So this is your assignment. Go buy it. It's The Dirty Truth on Social Drinking. Quote, everything in moderation, unquote, and other BS by Hadley Sorenson. And Hadley, where can everybody find you, follow you, all that good stuff?
So Instagram is sort of where I spend most of my online time, and I'm just at Hadley_Sorenson. And then I also have a website where you can keep up to date with, news and things coming up, and it's just hadleysorenson.com.
Ah, well, I wish you the best of luck. I'm so excited for you and
Thank you.
many congratulations. And to those of you listening, just remember that it is always a good choice to be kind. Rewind. I thank you for the honor of your time, and take what you like and leave the rest behind.